Hello and welcome, fellow awesomologists, to Awesomology. I'm Sue.
And I'm Ben, and in this episode, we'll update you on the latest steps toward radical accountability and then dive in just a little to navigating change when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, soul. Navigating a change like what we're going through is a big undertaking. And we know that it has taken a lot of steps to get us to the point we're at. And there are more steps to come to really make a change ingrained in our team. And anytime you're talking about change management, if you're trying to change the culture, it is a massive undertaking. So inevitably, you are going to try something and have the results leave you feeling less than awesome. And I reached that point recently, which maybe you already knew, and maybe you learned when you read these notes today that that's how I was feeling. So we were working to guide the team through setting shared work expectations for the team. And in honor of being fully transparent, I did not feel awesome about the way that any of that exercise went. And I thought it would be worth talking about here. So the brief overview of that was we asked everyone to come up with 3 to 5, which is the number. That is the universal number of how many things I ask for at any given time.
Right.
3 to 5 things that could be job expectations of anyone on the team. And where I realized afterwards things started to go off the rails is I was fully focused on this one day and created a note for everyone to share and had a good place that we could collaborate, and then everything else in the world happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not come back to look at what the task was. Did not think too much about it as everyone was doing their thing, to the point where I forgot I created that note.
Yeah.
We had the time scheduled, and I was feeling so overwhelmed. I mean, the day was overwhelming. We had 3 other things happening that day, all within. I'm making lots of excuses.
New person on the team.
Yeah. Oh God, was it his first day? No, it was his second day.
Yeah, second day, I think.
It was his second day on the team. And I think everyone reaches a point of overwhelmment sometimes, and that was mine.
Yeah.
We got there in that meeting, and I have certainly led meetings before. And I have not in my recent career felt so unprepared, so overwhelmed as I was that day. And yeah. And I think that's a thing that happens to people.
For sure.
Based on the fact that I'm people and it happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth talking about, because we have to take that and then move forward from it. We don't get to just decide that it was a failure, why I think this discussion is important, especially to share with people, is I think that is a thing that happens, that you get into this process of change management, something becomes overwhelming, and because you have other work, you have a day job to be doing, you decide that it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
And really good ideas, really great innovations, really exciting new moves forward for your culture can get scrapped because someone feels overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, deciding that it is too much is a pitfall, but also letting yourself believe that what you're doing isn't enough is another pitfall too, So, I mean, and this isn't me sugarcoating your experience or trying to say, "Oh, Sue, it's okay. Everything's
Nope.
fine. It's
I
gonna be
would be
okay."
fully willing to let you sugarcoat this one.
Yeah. But
Because
let's just boil it all the way down to everything, to the facts that you just laid out, right?
right.
Hey, there was a note.
Mhm.
People got an assignment.
Mhm.
People had the information that they needed to prepare for the meeting and put some information into the note.
True.
And everybody did, except
Mhm.
for did you have something in the note beforehand?
No, because
Yeah.
I forgot the note existed. I
Right. Yeah.
had notes,
Right.
but they were not in the
Right.
note.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right,
Yeah.
right.
I was like, I know that somebody didn't have their notes in the document, which was you,
Mhm.
but you did have notes, and you just added them in the meeting. And
Right.
so anyway, it's, I guess, all of that to say, it's not like you like didn't do anything.
Right.
It's just the circumstances definitely played out the way that you did, where, hey, let's get this assignment out there, let's get this thing rolling, and then back to the day job,
Right.
and then things happen out of sight, out of mind, or whatever. So, of course, the more ideal scenario is you revisit that thing in whatever timely manner you need to, so that you feel more prepared for the meeting and all that. And I'm sure that part of your feeling for this meeting was the fact that there was a new employee in the room, new teammate in the room, and you're making a first impression and all that stuff. And I don't even have to imagine, because I've been there. The feeling of like, maybe not, well, yeah, I mean, I think I had the feeling when I was new to this team and I had a whole bunch of new teammates, or um, anytime that I've had a first meeting, either that I was leading or participating in with somebody that was newer on our team, like constantly worrying about like, yeah, what's this person think of me right now?
Right.
Because either I'm clearly not as prepared as I should be, or I'm, hogging the microphone, or, whatever. Right.
Mhm.
So like, having to be constantly like questioning yourself in your brain while you're already feeling like behind, overwhelmed, not
Right.
prepared, like it just like snowballs super easily.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear you talk about this, and to hear like how uh, dissatisfactory the experience was. Because even though, I mean, I think I felt the same, like rush, or clunkiness about the meeting
Mhm.
that day too. I think for similar reasons, like I was feeling the pressure of having a new teammate on the team, and um, the awkwardness of us talking about this thing that's a result of us being pretty deep into this process, and he's coming
Mhm.
in like doesn't even have a copy of the book yet, or maybe had the copy of the book but hadn't even opened the cover. So just the weirdness of all that too, like he doesn't even know what we're talking about right now.
Right.
But also, like, guess what, everybody, like, teammates are going to join, not at the perfect start and finish of everything that's happening on your team. So like, you just got to deal with some of that. It's going to feel weird. I don't know, it's weird, but it can, like I say, kind of snowball some of the other feelings that might
Mhm.
happen as a result of the other circumstances or reason that it didn't feel good. So anyway, I'm definitely rambling now. I think that some of this is just natural in like everyday work life, and maybe some of the things that were happening. Um, but also, yeah, maybe a factor or result of being overwhelmed too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I am confidently applying that label of it being a factor of overwhelmment,
Hmm.
because that's how I felt at the moment,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think the more important thing, really, aside from how I feel about how something's going, uh, is I know that we had projects and things on the team that the team was working on that was causing them overwhelm,
Hmm.
right? So I can't, to walk into that meeting and know I can't get my stuff together. Um, and also, what I'm doing is expecting other people to be able to be here and focused and present and in the moment. And I can't do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, first of all, not fair to ask other people necessary. And I can see the look on your face.
Yeah.
And fair is a relative term, and what does fair mean? But to know what some of those circumstances were, we always. I'm making lots of excuses. It's fun to make excuses. Uh, no, um, one of the things that we do is we do our best
Mhm.
to get in-person things that work well in person scheduled when we can.
Yeah.
And scheduling is always a bear
Yeah.
when we want to get anything sort of outside of our regularly reoccurring meetings scheduled. Uh, so I think and not just everyone in the universe who has to schedule meetings with a team, you're always trying to do your best to get it to fit in.
Mhm.
And it can be incredibly challenging to not let meetings be the thing that overwhelms you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Forget about all of the work that you still have to do when you're not having a meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, it had this really perfect storm feeling for me, like and even still, even though I made that topic of this episode, it's not about dwelling on it. It's about saying, I'm not going to, for the purposes of what we're doing this year with this part of the podcast,
Mhm.
I had consideration of like, well, how can I, before we record this next podcast, how can I salvage that?
Mm.
How can I fix that so that I am I'm changing the narrative behind the scenes,
Sure.
and we can talk about why that was so wildly successful.
Yeah.
Um, and then I had to put the brakes on that and say, it is more useful to break down what happened, what were the contributing factors, and what do you do moving forward,
Yeah.
and have that be the transparency we offer.
Right.
Because as I believe we agree, it happens to everybody.
Right. For sure. Yeah. And any teams that might pursue a similar path, whether it's under the guidance or structure of the book that we've been using, or just their own kind of change management program or whatever, I'd be willing to bet more than half of them are going to experience what we're experiencing, and much less are probably going to feel like, oh, that went exactly as I planned. But I think aspects of what we've done have gone to plan and have gone well, and some not so much. And that'll be the more general experience of people, right? Like some things will go really well, some won't. Some things are going to take a lot more energy. Some are going to feel natural. Part of the process, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
One might say, trust the process. Sue.
One might. Yes.
But so as much as it felt weird and clunky and maybe disappointing, not to put words in your mouth, but I still do feel like good stuff came out of that quick hitter, fast, clunky, disappointing meeting. Everybody brought something. There was a really nice mix of format. Like some people, these were performance expectations, right? Some people's were just like a list of 7 of them, and each one was 2 or 3 words. Others had, a kind of like a title and then a big description and then everything in between, right? And so that was kind of cool to see how the team thought of putting performance expectations into words and how it just was so different. And then I guess along with that too, the expectations themselves that people brought, I thought it was interesting to see how there were a lot of similarities, but there were also plenty of differences. And I think that at trying to quickly recollect what everyone said, I feel like a lot of the differences were a result of people's different roles.
Mhm.
So, like designers would talk about an expectation being open and willing to take feedback, and not that you and I aren't open and willing to taking
Right.
feedback, but also like our role is more providing direction and, at least, in our
Right.
team, right? We're more often providing direction and less, I don't want to say concerned, but just our day is less about taking feedback and more about providing direction. So I could see why our list maybe didn't include something like
Mhm.
that. That's, clearly an everyday part of, or should be an everyday part of a designer's role. And
Right.
for them to know that that's an expectation and that they need to get better at it and, constantly be working at that,
Mhm.
was interesting. As just one example, I think that there were other things that came out in the lists that, it's like, oh, you wrote that because that's what you do every day. Or, that if that was something that you could hold yourself to a certain standard, you would probably perform better and people would look at your achievement of your job
Right.
better and all that stuff. So it was cool. I thought that we learned a lot even in that really short amount of
Mhm.
time. So
Yeah, that one, that's an interesting one to point out because it really is a reflection that, uh, maybe I didn't think to say that because I am accustomed to people on the team taking being, uh forced is not the right word. I mean, it's obligatory for them to take my feedback. So I don't I don't have to ask people
yeah,
to take my feedback,
right, right.
and neither do you.
Yeah,
Now, their openness to it
right.
is another part of that conversation.
Openness to it, interpretation of it,
Right.
attitude toward it,
Mhm.
all of those things.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make it sound so easy because, somebody maybe directly reports to you, but that might be the easiest form of feedback to take because it's kind of simple, a
Right.
little black and white. Like, well, I report to them, they're telling me to do this thing, I will do this thing. It's my job.
Right.
And I think I can say that and say with some truth that our team operates that way while also still living in a reality where we know that we're encouraging them to push back when they disagree
Mhm.
um, or have another idea or a different direction, right? So
Right.
they don't just blindly take orders or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I think when it becomes really challenging, and I think I'm happy to know that people on the team are considering the opportunity to take feedback differently or in a better way or whatever. Uh, I'm happy to know that because I think that this is a really important life skill,
Mhm.
and not everybody that they're going to get feedback from is somebody that they directly report to. So it won't always be that simple. It won't always be a black and white direct order kind of thing.
Right.
So whether people are open to hearing their ideas for how to do things differently or to push back a little bit, to know that. Um, Being open to feedback, taking feedback is something that they want to work on is cool. I don't know.
Mhm.
It was I don't mean to like get stuck on one bullet point because it
Right.
was a big list, but just a cool example I think to dive into a little bit to help tell the story today. So
Yeah. Yeah, and, to the point that it was a big list. I one of the things that I was surprised about was how sort of dissimilar things were.
mhm.
And that, of course, led to some of that overwhelmment to look at that and think, like, how are we going to categorize things in a way that's satisfactory to everyone?
Right,
Because
yeah,
I think a place that we could misstep with this is to say, um, bring everybody in a room, have that whole list in front of us, and start to say, this one is similar enough to that one, we're going to combine them.
right,
And especially knowing some of the personalities on our team where they might say, oh, okay.
mhm.
And it's very not okay.
Right,
That's not what they meant at all. But
yeah,
because they are sort of conflict avoidant, they will, just tuck that one away until,
right. And
you
the
know,
result is something that neither person really believes in.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, so good call. Something that we'll have to be really mindful of as we solidify that and
Hmm.
determine our list. And also, as much as I um, don't want to um, get to a list where there's a whole bunch of compromise and all of a sudden these don't really mean anything to anyone because they're so different or so commingled.
Hmm.
Um, I do think that there will be some version of a list where some things might not be everybody's top priority or something that
Hmm.
directly speaks to them, or some people might feel like, well, gosh darn, I'm really good at that already. I do that really well. All of that might be okay. There's
Right.
4 other things on the list that you can work on. And at the end of the day, we came to this list together as a team. And these are the expectations that we're going to hold
Hmm.
ourselves to. And because it's what our team needs right now,
Right.
and I hope that, this is something that kind of gets woven into our culture that in a way that I don't know when, but at some point we'll come back to them and be like, hey, are these valid? Is
Hmm.
there other stuff that we need to work on, new things? Do we
Right.
need to modify some, whatever?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think important to know, you point out maybe this possibility that people look at it and say, well, I'm already doing all of that.
yeah,
Not everything has to be a stretch goal.
right. Yeah.
If some of us are adept at interpersonal communication and some of us are not.
Mhm.
So if you tend to be adept at working in teams and good interpersonal communication and have some of those really excellent habits, then these are just reinforcing that you're doing the right thing.
Right.
And you don't have to fight
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
Other people are not, not everyone's at on the same page with every every interpersonal skill.
Hmm.
Um, for some of us, we need more help.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So take it as a compliment, you
Mhm.
jerk. Just kidding.
Right,
Uh,
right.
take that reinforcement and in that, hopefully see that you can still play a role in building others up and helping
Right.
others get to the level that you might be or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
we definitely need to like listen back to this episode before we
Right.
like take the next step or roll this out to the team, right? Because I think we've left ourselves some good guidance for maybe some potential missteps or things we need to
Mhm.
make sure we do. But
For sure.
yeah.
So let me ask you. I know that I get to a point of overwhelmment. First of all, using the word overwhelmment has
It's
overwhelmed
overwhelming.
me. But I know that I get there, and and whether it is by virtue of my uniquely neuroatypical brain or what it is, right? Um, doesn't matter. I for sure get there.
Mhm.
Uh, do you?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Tell me more about that. Say more words.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm human as well. I definitely,
Prove it.
yeah. Let me see some blood, Bauer. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. I don't know. I, surprise, surprise. Look at like the positive aspects of feeling overwhelmed and kind of like lean into the blessings of being overwhelmed. Not to say I don't have dark days
Mhm.
or, come home and like my family can tell like, oh, he's dealing with some stuff, I mean, um, for sure. So 2 things usually happen for me. One, I go quiet. If I'm overwhelmed, I just kind of like shut down a little bit,
Mhm.
block myself off. Um, and I don't think that very often that is because of like anger or some sort of like resentment or anything where I'm like steaming behind a closed door or anything like that. I think it's mostly because I need to process myself a little bit and
Mm.
like process the overwhelming and get myself to a place where I can like truly see the good in it, which me, Sue. I don't like to say always too much, but like I do feel like there is always I'll even correct myself and say almost always,
Mhm.
um, some good in that feeling of being overwhelmed. Because I mean, you really are kind of presented with a couple of opportunities there. It's like one, you're overwhelmed because you have. I mean, let's be real. Like a lot of the times when we're overwhelmed, it's because we have so much kick ass stuff happening in our lives, right?
Right.
Like we're busy at work. Our kids are pulling us everywhere. We have kids. Our kids are active and able to do stuff.
Mhm.
We have a family reunion coming up and, whatever, like all these things, I have family to go see, so for like many of us, like overwhelming, and I would say more than we even have the ability to recognize because it's easy to get stuck in the feeling of being overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Like many of us are overwhelmed because of all the good that
Right.
happens in our lives. Now, of course, we know it rains, it pours, and we can definitely be overwhelmed by a lot of crappy stuff happening at the same time too. Big heavy stuff like death, sometimes the fender bender, like all that stuff. But even then, like here I go, like I got a fender bender because I have a car because I can go to work,
Right.
and
Right.
so I think that sometimes it is maybe a perspective or attitude shift for sure. And I know that that's, not easy for everyone. And I also know that I probably am on the side of like sugarcoating, like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I have a car. So I got in an accident. Best day ever. Like, you know, I know that there's a level of that
Nobody
also,
likes that
yeah.
guy.
I also know that there's a level of that's unhealthy. I'm aware. But also I think, like to feel the pain
Mhm.
and recognize the blessing that comes with it is important. And I think that can help overwhelmed feel like a full bucket.
Right.
And, I don't know, maybe they're the same thing, maybe they're different. But the other opportunity that you get is you get an opportunity to like kind of reality check, cut some stuff, like maybe I'm overwhelmed because I've said yes to too many things and two of them I don't really care about. Well,
Mhm.
maybe it's time to say no to something.
Right.
And I think that, thinking of things like, I don't know, volunteer opportunities in life, or, maybe things that you've signed your kids up for that, like, they don't really enjoy it. They've even told you they don't. Well, maybe it's time to look at that thing and say, well, all right, it's time to cut that, whatever. I'm diving down into specific examples, but um, I think that an opportunity to give a healthy no to something is a really positive result of being overwhelmed
Mhm.
in our work. I think we have that opportunity more often than we like to recognize. I should say I like to recognize because I know the team is definitely one that checks me on like, well, how are we going to do that? Um, and we're small and scrappy and startup and hungry and trying to build a business here. So if I think I/we are going to lean on the side
Mhm.
of, well, like, hey, that's the mode of the business that we're in right now. We gotta grow and we gotta stretch ourselves a little bit, but man, we gotta always be cognizant of how people are feeling and doing, and also what we can deliver on, right? So,
Right.
so man, I certainly will own and recognize the fact that we could definitely be better at giving some healthy no's, whether it's internal stuff that we have to say no to just make some time to be a little scrappy and grow some client work or whatever. Or, who knows, maybe even the other way around. Like, hey, there's some internal stuff that we got to take care of. And we have to dedicate some time to grow our business the way that we want. And that might mean not being able to do some work for some people too. So some combination of all that is probably something that, we not probably something we should be a bit more mindful of and come to the um, come to a comfortable place where we can give a no that's mindful, healthy,
Right.
considerate, and not just no for the sake of, oh, we know we're too busy so can't do that.
Mhm. I'm really glad you used the word stretch because as you are talking and as I am, now that we're having this conversation, this is my so thank you for being part of the solution. Uh, this was my watershed moment of now how am I pivoting to move on to the next thing. Um, it I think there is a way in which being overwhelmed is like working a muscle. And if you can work a muscle just the right amount that you are stretching it, you are getting more blood to it, you
Hmm.
are moving it, but you don't overwork it so that you pull it,
Right. Right.
then you're right in that sweet spot. And I think there is a certain amount of overwhelmment that is expanding your brain,
Yeah.
right? It is basically setting you up for success the next time when you can look back and say, oh, well, that sort of set of circumstances happened to me before, and I 100% survived it,
Yeah.
and I learned lessons from it. And so now that exact same thing can happen to me, and I know I will do the same thing. I can apply the lessons I've learned. I can move forward with it, and now it's going to take more
Hmm.
to overwhelm me.
Yeah.
You're going to have to keep pushing me
Yeah.
to get me to that breaking point again,
Yeah.
and not in a bad way,
Right.
but like
Yeah. Well,
do better.
yeah.
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 Like, remember Forrest Gump, like Captain Dan on top of the boat and saying, "Is that all you got?"
First off, he was lieutenant, so
Lieutenant
let's get
Dan.
his
So
position
sorry.
right.
So sorry. Be
Yeah.
that guy. Will ya? Will you be that guy?
You know about my respect for the chain of command.
Especially involving Gary Sinise.
Right, exactly.
Specifically
Yeah,
involving Gary Sinise.
yeah. No, I mean, you mentioned the sweet spot, and yeah, I think the only way to find it is to go past it every now and then,
Mhm.
and I guess in the same breath to be a little short of it every now and then too.
Right.
I mean, both of those things are necessary to find it. And if you're growing as a person, growing as an organization, a professional, blah blah blah, like you're gonna always, that sweet spot's always gonna be moving.
Right.
So
Yeah. Well, and
that doesn't make it any easier.
right. And it's not just moving because of conditions professionally. It's moving because of
Yeah,
your health in the particular moment, your personal relationships, the weather, the economy,
yeah,
you name it.
100%.
It makes all of that, and maybe your tolerance shrinks one day, um, because of outside factors that you can't control.
Right.
And to be able to start to mindfully understand, oh, like today's not the day and I'm not your girl. You need
Yeah.
to you need to back off, back yourself down, because today the thing that you are going to present me with, not happening.
Yeah.
Tomorrow,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
or in the future sometime, but to be able to have a frame of reference to say no in a mindful way, and still maintain a relationship
Yeah.
with the people you're saying no to.
Right. Yeah. This whole conversation, I'm excited to go back to our list and kind of like the draft performance expectations that we have, because they kind of have been or that that exercise, that meeting has been the inspiration for this whole episode and this whole topic of being overwhelmed. And um, it sounds like both of us are comfortable with a certain level of it, or understand
Mhm.
the importance of it, and the healthiness of stretching yourself, and maybe the challenge and the growth that comes with finding the sweet spot and all that stuff. I don't know if there was anything about stretching yourself, or
Mm,
like uh, um, the benefits of overwhelmment on that list. So
right.
I feel
Yeah.
like this conversation is um, maybe more relevant to you and I, just in our roles, but also like everybody on the team feels this and experiences in one way, shape, or form. So yeah. Anyway, all this to say, maybe it's something that we should expect of our teams to
Right.
handle overwhelmment, to always not stress yourself, stretch yourself in a healthy way, and all those things. So we should
Yeah.
workshop that a little bit.
Yeah. That, you know what? That's interesting, because I think that people innately seek comfort, right? And if you are, the challenge of this particular task was to essentially say, tell us the conditions in which people will be working so that our team is functioning,
Hmm. Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so most people, and even I don't think I put anything on my list that said, like, I don't know, no pain, no gain or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But I think people are going to naturally gravitate to, here are the things that if everyone else does these things or if I do these things, I'm most comfortable here, rather than a performance expectation being sometimes expect to be
Right.
uncomfortable
Yeah.
and then support each other when we're feeling that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if we, because that is a truth in every job I've had.
Yeah.
Um, and you can be uncomfortable, and the organization, the culture, the climate, everything can still be healthy.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think some people have a base assumption that if you are uncomfortable in something, that there's something wrong,
Sure.
which
Right. Yeah.
is not necessarily true.
Right. Could be.
Could be true,
Could be.
could be true,
Yeah.
but also, it could just be a moment of stretching and being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
um, that you need to grow through.
Hmm. Yeah.
Such great advice we have.
Ah, so
If
good.
only we had followed it
Right.
slow these 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I threw quick bullet points of insights that I wanted to make sure we said out loud. We've talked about uh, at least one of them, which is overwhelm is a normal part of the growth process.
Right.
When you are trying to build, to grow, to do something different, especially uh no, scrap that. Not especially. I was going to say especially when you're going without sort of a established training thing, right? Where we've been talking this whole year about we're building this plane as we're flying it, we're figuring it out. Um Training, having a training schedule or whatever, management schedule doesn't change whether or not you're going to be overwhelmed.
Right.
Doesn't fix that.
Yeah.
Um, it would eliminate one factor in your overwhelmness, which is you might have a manual you can look at.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's a normal part of growth.
Yeah.
You are going to feel, and I certainly have felt that way in a lot, not not overwhelmed to the point of shutting down like this was for me, but I have certainly felt that, like, the overwhelming feeling of what's going to happen, how are people going to react, how are we going to turn that to the benefit of the team, that kind of overwhelm feeling
Yeah.
throughout the whole process. So
Yeah.
you should be a little bit like, life is scary. I
Yeah.
don't know how else to
Right.
say that,
Yeah.
right? Life is scary and unpredictable. And if you are never feeling stretched or overwhelmed or stressed, then you're living in a pretty safe, overly comfortable,
Yeah.
possibly coddled
Yeah.
kind of spot.
Yeah. I'm grinning because I don't know who said it. There's a race car driver that is famous for a quote. I'll look it up as soon as we're done here.
Hey,
Something like, if you feel like you're in control, you're not going fast enough.
yeah,
And I think it kind of applies to what we're talking about, like kind of got to just be a tad out of control if
right.
you really want to go, like,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah. And that sort of attitude, especially in the business that we're in, having the knowledge that you are going to have to outdrive your headlights
mm,
uh, means that you have to get ahead. That's how you get ahead of other
right,
people.
right.
You don't get ahead by saying, "Oh, what did they do and what did they do?" And we're parallel now, and I'm going to
Right.
do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to sort of push forward into that darkness a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Bullet point number 2, overwhelm does not equal failure. I don't, and even as self-deprecating as I have been about this situation, I don't actually see it as a failure, because a failure to me is the end of a process. You're done. You have failed.
Mhm.
And certainly in this situation, we're not at the end of the process.
Yeah.
And this is my reminder to encourage people, uh, if you are still here, if you haven't gotten to the end of any part of a journey, you haven't failed yet,
Yeah.
because there is a next step you can take. It might have been a no good, very bad day, but it's not equivalent to failure
Yeah.
unless you, I guess, unless you let it be.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we've had plenty of, uh, uh, what am I trying to say? We've had plenty of opportunity throughout this process to look back and be like, should have done that differently. Should
Mhm.
have done this altogether, or should have done this instead of that. Um, Maybe there was failure in those moments, but they don't feel like it because we acknowledge it, learn from it, and
Right.
here we are. I suppose they all could have been much easier to identify as failures if we'd quit, like you said. If
Hmm.
we would have just stopped there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder our, if our, if what we do for a living makes that feeling of saying, oh, that didn't work, we did the next thing and moved on,
Yeah.
that much easier,
Right.
because that is part of the creative process.
For sure.
And you forever are going to look at something, even something that you think like that was the best I could do at that time. You're going to look back at it and say, "Ooh, but I shouldn't have done that."
Even something that went well,
Right.
and everybody else thinks it went well. Like we can look back on plenty of those kind of things too and be like, yeah, if we had only, or if we
Right.
had done this too, or
Yeah.
whatever. So, yeah.
So we're uniquely positioned to be able to not see things along the process as failure
Right.
and stop there, because it's part of what we
Can't.
do every single day.
Right.
So encouragement, if you are not a marketer or in the creative space, if you're an accountant, same thing still applies to you. It's
Yeah.
still not a failure.
Right.
It is, it's learning and it's growing
Yeah.
and it's good for you. Just like cough
Just like
medicine.
Wheaties.
Just like Wheaties. Yeah, either one.
Yeah.
And final thought, and this is, I think, what we are definitely doing today, is that the important thing about overwhelm is when you can step out of it to examine and address the factors that delayed your progress.
Yeah.
Because that, in every way, that's all this is. It was a factor that delayed progress. It was uh not the end of the world, as you were so fond of saying. Nobody died.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and if we can, just like anything else, if we can examine what those factors were, we change them next time.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We've used this concept or this picture in our brains of like strengthening a muscle, as we've talked about this today. And I think like another muscle, or maybe something that contributes to the muscle being stronger, is the ability to like recognize the feeling of
Mhm.
being overwhelmed, and then dealing with it. I don't mean like deal with it, kid, like deal with it like that, but
Rub some dirt in
yeah,
it.
yeah, walk it off. Doing something about it, I guess, is really what I'm saying. And also not doing some things about it. Like, don't let your relationship suffer because of it,
Mhm.
even though some of those relationships might be contributing to the overwhelmment. But, I think the first step, just recognizing like, whew, I'm feeling away right now,
Mhm.
and like take that deep breath and, recognize the good in it, recognize the change you might be able to make, things that you can change, and like love the people around you that can help you get out of it, even if they're part of the problem,
Right.
because also like you're probably going to need some help from them too to get out of it. Like you might be able to change your behavior or change something that you're doing, but if someone's contributing to the problem and they don't change what they're doing, well, you're probably going to be back there real quick. So
that is what, I'm going to try and form a sentence here. Why start now, right? That is such a core thing to talk about when we're talking about accountable teams, because it is another thing that came into my mind, that part of the overwhelm when we're getting into trying some of these things is, for me, this feeling of having the rest of the team say, well, prove to us this is going to work. So make this, why can't you? And nobody's saying that out loud.
Right.
And I acknowledge that.
And some people might not even be thinking it.
Right. But that's certainly what I hear in my head of, make this make sense to us. And that's your responsibility to do it.
Yeah.
If that is actually the case, if you are overwhelmed by a team who is doing that to you, especially if they express it out loud, like, no, you didn't do that well, you need to do it better and make us understand it, then it is a really good time to think about accountability, because I can explain something to you. I can't make you understand it.
Yeah.
All I can do is present you the information that I have, and then we have to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
So if there is no dialogue, if it is all this expectation that you as the leader are going to come in here, make all of this make sense, and if you don't, then nothing happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a key discussion about accountability on that team.
Yeah.
I am not saying this is our team.
Yeah. Right.
And this is all my own internal demons. But
they're real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final thoughts?
I don't. I thought I just crushed my closing thoughts.
You did.
Earlier,
and then I jumped on them.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Danced all over them.
You just made them better. It's all good. No, I really don't have anything to like put a nice, neat button on everything we talked about today, but I will close, or maybe my final thought will be thanking you for like the vulnerability to talk about an experience that probably isn't awesome to talk about, especially when we're hitting record and all that. But that takes courage, to like look back on something that, didn't go awesome and you feel accountability for and ownership of, and to dissect it a little bit. Not always easy. So nice job.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Someday you're going to be really sick of me doing this. So far, you've been very good about it.
Yeah.
But I think it wears out. It wears on you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Ask my husband.
I'll let you know. Well, he and I have been talking. He's given me some great pointers.
Like he said to you, Ben, when she says, I just think it's interesting, she does not think it's interesting. Well, we appreciate you, listener, staying with us on this journey. We appreciate you listening to this episode. And even when at least one of us is not at their best, being here to support us, keep coming back to hear more. We have one episode left for this year.
Oh, man. I didn't realize that.
We have one more like this.
One more like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have ideas on what that last episode will be.
Cool.
You can always follow us on social media if you want to find out what that last episode will be. Or you can get in touch with us at our website, exclamationqso.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Sue. Thanks again, friends, for tuning in. Be awesome, and see you next time.
The Awesomeology Podcast is a production of Exclamation Services. Thanks to Nick Mulliver for sound production and Kylie Ganther for our cover artwork.
Executive producers are me, Ben Bauer, and my friend, Suzanne Campbell.